Hi everyone, today we're going to be going through how to calculate redundancy payments in Excel. In the UK, the rules are that if you're age 21 and below, for every year you've worked in your employment, you'll get 0.5 of your equivalent salary per week. And the same for in the bracket 22 to 40 age group, you'll get 1 week's worth of your salary as a redundancy payment for every year that you've worked within that bracket. And then 41 and over, you'll get 1.5 weeks equivalent of your salary. A few parameters to remember is that the length of service is capped at 20. So even though you might have worked for 40 years in theory, you can only get 20 years worth of length of service in this redundancy calculation. And the other thing is that the weekly equivalent of your salary is capped at £700. So even though you might have earned more than say 100k a year, you'll be capped statutory wise at £700 per week. So the first thing we want to do is put these parameters in somewhere in a cell. So maximum LOS means maximum length of service. I'll put in 20 here. And maximum amount per week, I'll put in £700 here. I'll name these cells just so they're easier to understand when we come to filling out the formulas. So I'll put max LOS and I'll press enter. And then again for this cell H8, I'll put in max per week and press enter. The next thing is these ranges for weekly pay. We need to put like the minimum age group, so when we do the lookup, we can look it up properly. So the minimum age group for the first 0 to 21 is 0. The next one minimum is 22, and the next one minimum is 41 years of age. And now we want to create a table that has all the ages and all the weekly pay that those age groups relate to. So in terms of age, we can use a sequence formula, and we want say 100 rows and 1 column, close bracket. That will spill down a sequence of 1 to 100. And next to that, we want to XLOOKUP the value, the age, in, we want to XLOOKUP that value in this section here. Press F4 so it's locked. And we want to look up the weekly pay in here. Press F4 to lock. There's something in XLOOKUP which I guess doesn't get used much, and that's whether you want to find the exact match or the nearest. So if I press comma, the next question it asks is, if not found, what do you want to output? It will be found, so that's irrelevant. Press comma again, it gets the match type, and the match type we want is exact match or next smaller item, which is -1, close bracket, and then press enter. Double click that little right hand bottom side, and then that should copy the formula down. And what we're looking for here is up to age 21, it should be 0.5. Yeah, that's correct. And then from 22 to age 40 should all be ones. So 22 here and age 41, and then 1.5 after that. So that's worked, which is good. We've got our parameters set up, we've got our table, so a bit of fake data to work on. We've got employee details here, employee date of birth to calculate the age, employee hire date to calculate the length of service. We've got a redundancy effective date, and we've got their salary. So the helper columns you need, I'll unhide this, are obviously age is one of them, length of service. This, oh yeah, I forgot to add. So if you've been in your employment less than 2 years, you don't get a redundancy payment. So we need to check whether the length of service is 2 years or above. And then the next column is we calculate total weeks payable for the redundancy payment, then the actual pound amount of how much an employee would get. So to calculate age, we use date diff formula. So equals date DIF. So it will be the date of birth, comma, the redundancy effective date, comma, and we want that in years, so it will be the text Y, and then close the bracket and press enter. So there we have the age. We can double click that right hand side and copy that down. Same thing with length of service, equals date diff, and we want the hire date, comma, then the redundancy effective date, comma, which will be the length of service as of the redundancy date, and then speech marks Y, speech marks, close bracket, enter. Copy that down as well. Next thing we want is whether the length of service is 2 or more. So we can just simply do equals length of service is more than or equal to 2. Press enter, it'll give you a true false. So double click that little right hand side to copy down. So that's working. So 1 is false and the rest of them is true. Good. So we want total weeks to pay, and the way we do this is one thing I forgot actually was in this length of service we want to cap it to 20, so you don't want 25 in there. So the formula you want to do is min, min, open bracket, then select the cell which has the 20 in it, which we've already named as max underscore LOS, so it's easy to follow, comma, and then close the bracket at the end. So when we copy that down, that 25 should turn into 20 because that's the cap. There we are. Then we got length of service. Now we want to calculate how many years each employee has taken within each age group. So for example, if someone started at age 20 and then their redundancy date happened when they were in age 23, they haven't worked the whole of their age 23, so we'd have to sum up their weekly amounts for age 20 to 22, so not including their current age, which will be 0.5 plus 0.5 plus 1 equals 2. So a sum ifs can achieve that. So the formula in here, total weeks, is going to be equal sum ifs, open bracket. The sum range is going to be the number of weeks. So click C13, Control Shift down F4 to lock that range, comma, and then the criteria range is going to be for the age. So select that range, F4, comma, and that age has to be open speech marks more than or equal to, close speech marks, ampersand, 38, but let me put the bracket in first, open bracket, age 38 minus length of service 13, then close the bracket. So what that's saying is I want the sum if to be more than 38 minus 13, then comma, and to get the in between we need to do this step again. So the criteria range 2 is age again, so B13, sorry, Control Shift down F4, comma, and this time open speech marks, this has to be less than close speech marks, ampersand, has to be less than the age of 38. Select P8 and then close the bracket, press enter, and then copy that formula down by double clicking the bottom right hand side corner. We see that a figure has been calculated for someone that's got only 1 year length of service. We don't want that, so the way we can get rid of that is by simply adding at the end of the formula times by that cell, times by true. So in a formula, the true converts to 1 and falses convert to 0 when you're calculating numbers. So times by true, and if you copy that down, that 1 should disappear into a 0. And the last step now is to calculate how much redundancy payment they're eligible for, depending on the number of weeks we've just calculated. So what we want here is equals their salary divided by 52, and that needs to be capped to £700. So the way you do that is just after the equals, put in min, then click cell called max underscore per week, comma, and then obviously our salary calculation, then close the bracket, press enter. So that's capped at 700. If we copy that down, we'll get how much each employee is eligible per week. Just notice these need to be all the 1st of July. Yeah, there we go. So we've got the weekly, and from the weekly we just simply times by the number of weeks that we just calculated in our sum if, and copy that down. So there we have it. That's the number that each employee needs to be paid in terms of redundancy, statutory wise, for the UK. I hope you found that video useful and you get to apply it in the near future. Goodbye.